The scream tore through the underground parking garage before anyone saw her. Mara Vale stumbled backward between two black SUVs, her heel catching on the concrete lip of the ramp. Her phone skidded across the floor, the screen flashing once before going dark. A man's shadow loomed over her, tall and deliberate, blocking the exit like it had always been meant to end this way. "Please," she said, breathless, one hand already curled protectively over her stomach before she could stop herself. The man smiled, slow and knowing. That was when the security alarms went off. Red lights flooded the garage. Footsteps echoed. Shouts followed. The shadow retreated, melting into the maze of vehicles just as armed guards poured in from both ends. Someone grabbed Mara by the shoulders, steadying her as her knees buckled. She didn't hear what they were saying. All she could think was that it had almost happened, that the secret had almost been taken from her by force, and that Adrian Cross still had no idea what she was carrying. If you're already hooked, pause for 1 second like the video. It helps these stories reach more people who love slow-burn drama like this. 3 hours earlier, Adrian Cross had been standing at the glass wall of his penthouse office, watching the city bend itself around his name. Cross dynamics dominated the skyline. Steel, money, influence stacked one acquisition at a time. Adrian liked heights. He liked distance. People looked smaller from above, and smaller things were easier to manage. "Tomorrow morning," he said calmly without turning around. "I want the announcement drafted, vetted, and scheduled across every major outlet." Mark Ellison, his chief aide, hesitated. "Sir, about Ms. Vale." Adrian's jaw tightened just slightly. "She resigned," Mark continued carefully. "No notice. HR says she declined an exit interview." Adrian turned then. "Slowly. Precisely." "That's not how this works," he said. Mark swallowed. "She's already liquidated the waterfront apartment. The townhouse too." The silence that followed was dangerous. Adrian crossed the room, picked up the tablet from the desk, and scrolled through the asset transfers himself. His name had been scrubbed clean from every document. Efficient. Final. "She thinks she's done," he said quietly. Mark didn't respond. Adrian smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "She'll come back." Mara sat alone in the clinic waiting room, the smell of antiseptic clinging to the back of her throat. 6 weeks. The doctor had said it gently, like that made it easier. As if tone could soften the weight of something that had already rearranged her entire future. She stared at the ultrasound printout folded inside her bag. She hadn't looked at it yet. She wasn't ready to see proof. Proof made things real, and real things demanded decisions. Her phone buzzed again. "Adrian." She turned it face down. The thing about being Adrian Cross's executive assistant was that people assumed you were powerful by proximity. They didn't see the contracts. The quiet clauses that turned affection into obligation and silence into currency. They didn't see how easily gratitude became leverage. Mara had been 23 when Adrian noticed her. She'd been brilliant, efficient, invisible. Exactly the kind of person he trusted, because trust to Adrian meant predictability. He had given her everything. Except freedom. The pregnancy changed that. Not because she expected love. She never had. But because for the first time, something existed that Adrian hadn't chosen. She paid at the counter, stood, and walked out without looking back. By the time Adrian tracked her down, it was raining. Mara was loading the last of her boxes into the trunk of a rented sedan when his car pulled up behind her, black and imposing, cutting off any chance of escape. She didn't turn around. "You should have told me," Adrian said, stepping out. Mara closed the trunk with deliberate calm. "There was nothing to tell. You don't resign from my company without telling me. I don't belong to your company." Adrian studied her. The rain soaked through his coat, but he didn't seem to notice. "This is about Celine." Mara laughed once, sharp and brittle. "This is about me." He stepped closer. Too close. The way he always did when he wanted to remind her who held the space. "You're being emotional." Her hands clenched at her sides. "No," she said quietly. I'm being careful. That was when he saw it. Not the pregnancy. He was too used to seeing what he expected, but the resolve. The withdrawal. The way she'd already left him somewhere behind. Come back, he said. Not a request. Just until the merger closes. She should have said no. Instead, she thought of medical bills. Time. Of how quickly a body could betray you. 1 month, she said. Then I'm gone. Adrian nodded. Victory to him always looked like agreement. The gala was a spectacle of wealth disguised as charity. Crystal chandeliers. Strings of quiet laughter. Deals sealed with champagne and handshakes that lingered just a second too long. Mara moved through it all with practiced ease, Adrian's arm resting possessively at the small of her back. Across the room, Celine Whitford watched them with a smile sharpened by suspicion. Relax, Adrian murmured. You're tense. You announced your engagement, Mara replied. Did you expect me to celebrate? He glanced down at her. I expected you to understand. That word again. She pulled away just enough to breathe. That was when she saw Julian Reed. He stood near the bar, hands in his pockets, looking profoundly out of place among the suits and curated laughter. When his eyes met hers, surprise flickered into recognition, then something warmer. Better. Mara, he said, like it was a question he'd been holding for years. Her chest tightened. Julian. Adrian's grip tightened. Do you know him? Yes, she said. From before. Julian smiled gently. You disappeared. Mara held his gaze. So did you. But the truth was, only one of them had learned how to survive being erased. If you've ever had a one that got away, tap subscribe. You're going to want the rest of this. That night, Mara threw up in the bathroom of Adrian's penthouse, one hand braced against the marble sink, the other shaking. She rinsed her mouth, stared at her reflection. Ill. Fractured. She whispered, I'm trying. She didn't know who she was saying it to. Victor Kane noticed everything. He noticed Mara's paleness. The way her hand lingered at her midsection. The way Adrian hovered without touching. Some secrets announced themselves long before they were spoken. And Victor Kane had always been very good at listening. Mara couldn't sleep. Not really. The rain had stopped, but the city hummed outside her window like it knew every misstep she had made. The ultrasound printout sat on the bedside table, a quiet accusation she couldn't face. Every time she reached for it, Adrian's voice echoed in her mind. You're being emotional, he'd said. She had called it careful. She should have left the city entirely, but something made her stay. Money, timing, fear. The city didn't forgive mistakes, and she was still very much in debt to survival. The knock on her door startled her. Quick, measured. She grabbed her phone, hand shaking. Who is it? She called. Mark. It's urgent. Her stomach twisted. Adrian's aid was precise, competent, unshakable. When he said urgent, it meant Adrian had escalated. Mara opened the door just a crack. What is it? Sir wants you in the office, Mark said. His voice was neutral. Nothing betrayed him. Nothing ever betrayed him. I'm done with him, she whispered. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. Not tonight. The office was dark except for the city lights spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows. Adrian stood with his back to the city, hands resting lightly on the edge of his desk. He didn't turn when she entered. He didn't need to. She already knew the weight of his stare would find her even from across the room. You came, he said simply. I had no choice, she replied, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. He finally turned. Rain had left streaks on his suit, but his posture was impeccable. Adrian Cross always looked like a man who had been carved from the city itself. Tall, unyielding, perfect edges. Mark says the merger is at risk, he said. You understand why I need you. I understand why you want me, Mara said, and the words cut deeper than she intended. But this isn't about the company. It's about you wanting control. Adrian froze. the first crack she had ever seen in his carefully constructed armor. "Do not," he started slowly, "turn everything into accusations." "I'm not accusing," she snapped. "I'm stating facts. You wanted me. You got me. Now I'm leaving." Adrian's gaze softened, but not in a way that comforted her. It was an acknowledgement of danger, a man aware of the consequences but unwilling to step back. "You're not leaving," he said. "Not now." Mara's laugh was short and bitter. "You're not my keeper." He stepped forward closer, and she felt that magnetic pull she had resisted for years. "I'm not keeping you," he said. "I'm saving you from mistakes you're about to make." She recoiled. "By controlling me. By preventing you from walking blind," he said quietly. "You think you know the consequences, but you don't." Her hand automatically rested over her stomach. She couldn't lie anymore. She couldn't pretend this was just business, just survival. Adrian might not know, but her body spoke truths he had no right to see. "You don't get to save me," she said, voice breaking. And for a heartbeat she thought he would stop. Maybe for the first time he would. But he didn't. He reached out, not to touch her, but as if to bridge the chasm she had built. "You're carrying something that will change everything," he said softly. "And you can't do it alone." Mara left the office feeling exposed, torn and furious. She shouldn't feel anything at all, but that had been the trap all along. She had known the risk from the moment she had allowed him into her life, not as a lover, not as a friend, but as a constant gravitational force she could not escape. She returned to her apartment, and the phone rang almost immediately. Julian's name flashed across the screen. She didn't answer. He left a message. "Mara, I'm not asking you to fight him. I'm asking if you'll let yourself breathe. If you can't, then at least don't disappear alone." Her chest ached. She wanted to call him back, but Adrian's shadow lingered in every decision. She knew Julian would be patient, always patient, but patience could not hold her stomach from twisting into knots every time she thought of Adrian's sharp eyes, the way he studied her as if he could see every secret she kept. 3 days later, the gala. Mara had tried to prepare herself. Black gown, simple, unassuming. Hair up to hide the restless energy she carried. She didn't want to meet Adrian there. She didn't want to meet anyone. But the world had other plans. Adrian approached from across the room. Hand on her back, guiding, guarding, claiming. Celine watched from the opposite side. Her gaze sharp enough to draw blood. "Relax," Adrian said quietly. "It's just appearances." Mara smiled thinly. "Appearances kill faster than reality sometimes." He didn't respond. Not verbally. His hand lingered, subtle but firm. She wanted to shake him off, to run, but she couldn't. The air between them was charged with everything they had never said, everything they had never allowed themselves to feel. Then Julian appeared. Smooth, calm, grounded. A contrast so sharp it made her stomach clench. He smiled, a small, quiet acknowledgement. She wanted to walk to him. She wanted to be safe. She wanted to ignore Adrian's magnetic pull, the ownership he demanded, the history they shared. But she stayed. Victor Kane didn't wait for permission. He cornered her in the parking structure later that night. Not violently, but with precision. Every word, every movement calculated. He knew about the pregnancy, or at least suspected. He knew that with Adrian distracted, Mara was vulnerable. "You've got something," he said casually. "Something he wouldn't want me to have. Let's talk about it." Mara's instincts kicked in. Her phone was dead. Adrian couldn't hear her screams. Julian wasn't there. She realized how alone she was, and the weight of that reality pressed into her chest harder than any punch could. She faked a fainting spell, slipped from his grasp for just long enough to trigger the alarm she had installed weeks before. Red lights, rushing footsteps, chaos, enough to disorient him and buy her a precious few minutes. By the time Adrian arrived with Mark and security in tow, Mara was standing, composed, breathing shallow but alive. Adrian's eyes burned, not with anger, but with something she couldn't yet name. You were careless, he said. No, she replied sharply. I was smart. You think surviving makes you safe, he said. I think surviving keeps me alive, she countered. Something you never taught me. Mara spent the next week in a constant battle between fear, strategy, and emotion. Every call from Julian reminded her of safety. Every silent text from Adrian reminded her of magnetic force she could never resist. She realized painfully that both men were right in different ways. Julian was the calm, unwavering presence she could grow with. Adrian was the storm she could never outrun, the truth she had always known. Mara walked the streets at dawn, the city still wet from rain. She pulled her coat tighter, but the chill had little to do with the weather. Every shadow, every reflection reminded her of Adrian's presence, the way he had claimed her attention, her body, her decisions. She wondered if she had ever truly been free, or if freedom had been an illusion she had whispered to herself at night. Her phone buzzed again. Julian. Coffee. Need to talk. Her hand hovered. She wanted to call back to hear the calm in his voice, but her stomach twisted at the thought of Adrian. You can't run from him forever. The thought wasn't hers. It was a memory. She ignored the message and entered a small cafe. Julian was already there, sitting with a quiet posture that seemed impossible in a city that demanded constant performance. Mara, he said softly. No judgment, no anger. Just recognition. She sat down, heart hammering. She started, then stopped. Words had failed her all week. He leaned back. You don't have to explain. I just want to make sure you're okay. She wanted to say that she wasn't, that the chaos surrounding Adrian had begun to hollow her out. But she didn't. She only whispered, I'm trying. Julian's gaze softened. You'll figure it out. The words were simple, but they felt heavier than any apology Adrian could have given. Back at Cross Dynamics, Adrian was pacing. The gala, the threats, the disobedience, it had all been too much. Control was failing, and for the first time he had to face it. Not in theory, not as strategy, but in reality. He remembered the panic in Mara's eyes during the parking garage incident. The way she had acted alone, resourceful but terrified. She survived, he muttered, voice barely audible. Because she had to. Mark entered, cautious. Sir. Adrian didn't respond immediately. He closed his eyes, recalling the weeks of tension, the way she had kept secrets, the way she had been smarter than every move he had anticipated. She's not mine to protect, he finally said. Not really. And maybe never was. Mark said nothing because there was nothing to say. Adrian's acknowledgement was both confession and condemnation. Days passed. Mara's apartment became a sanctuary and a prison. Every movement, every conversation, every interaction carried weight. She had to be careful, not just for herself, but for the life she carried. Julian visited twice a day, quietly observing, providing support without overstepping. His patience was both comforting and infuriating. He was a constant reminder that a different life was possible, one where love didn't demand fear. Adrian, in contrast, was omnipresent. Calls, emails, private messages. Every interaction a subtle test, every silence a challenge. He didn't threaten. He didn't beg. He simply existed in the spaces she tried to fill with normalcy. And Mara realized that for the first time, she was balancing more than just fear. She was balancing the pull of two truths, one stormy, one steady, and both inescapable. Then came the revelation. Victor Kane, cornered by legal and corporate pressure, let slip a detail in a careless conversation. Mara, hidden behind a partition in a cafe where Julian had insisted she rest, overheard her name. Ashbourne. The lost Ashbourne daughter. Her childhood erased. Her family fractured. Her identity stolen. Everything Adrian represented, the corporate influence, the controlled environment, the cage, suddenly took on a new light. Survival had shaped her, but survival had also hidden the truth she never even knew she was missing. Julian, sitting across from her, noticed the change. Mara. she whispered, trying to process. The words caught in her throat. I'm not who I thought I was. He reached across the table, hand brushing hers. Then who are you? She wanted to say, I'm yours. She wanted to say, I'll go anywhere with you. But the words would have been a lie. Because Adrian in some way had marked her soul. Adrian learned the same truth later that day, but from Mark's cautious voice rather than through Mara. She knows, Mark said, barely meeting his eyes. Adrian didn't respond immediately. His mind ran through every memory, every conversation, every silence. She had never been just his assistant. She had never been just a contract. She had been a force he had tried to contain and now couldn't even define. I've lost control, he said finally. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Calmly, the weight of realization crushing him. Mark nodded, but the gesture couldn't bridge the distance. Adrian felt a hollow ache that was new. She had been clever, brave, untouchable, and he had let her go. Mara walked into the office early the next morning, rain streaking her coat, hands trembling slightly, though she refused to admit it. The building was quieter than usual. Even the city seemed to pause, waiting. Adrian was already there. He didn't turn when she entered, but the air between them pulled taut, as if both knew the conversation could not be avoided. You came, he said simply, voice low. I had to, she replied. We need to talk. He finally turned. His eyes softened, just enough to remind her why she had ever stayed. I don't know if I can fix what's been broken, he said. She shook her head. It's not about fixing. It's about truth. Silence. You survived because you were smart, he said finally. And strong. And because I failed you. Her hand automatically went to her stomach. It's not just about me anymore. He took a step closer, but there was no aggression, only awareness. I know. And I'm trying to understand that. Mara looked into his eyes and saw regret, raw and unpolished. But she also saw something dangerous. The pull that had never let go, that had almost claimed everything she had fought to protect. I can't be afraid of you anymore, she said. Then don't be, he whispered. Her phone buzzed. Julian. She looked down at the screen. One word here. Her chest tightened. Every instinct screamed both options were right, but the cost of choosing one would wound her in a way she could not avoid. Later that evening, she met Julian at a small cafe outside the city center, the quietest place she could find. You don't have to make a decision tonight, he said gently, as he slid into the seat across from her. I don't have a choice, she admitted, voice barely audible. Every path I take hurts someone. Every path I take reshapes me. Julian nodded. That's how it always works. But you don't have to carry the weight alone. Not anymore. She wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to the calm, safe life he represented. But the other life, the storm, the intensity, the danger, still called to a part of her she couldn't deny. Adrian's words, his gaze, the way he had recognized her survival, kept looping in her mind. Failed you. Julian reached across the table, hand brushing hers. You'll choose what's best for you, he said. And I'll respect it. No matter what. Her eyes filled. The weight of needing to decide, of loving both men in different ways, nearly broke her. Comment what you think Mara should do. Adrian. Julian. Or herself. Meanwhile, Adrian was pacing the empty Cross Dynamics office, replaying every interaction, every moment of oversight. His usual composure was gone. He had learned her secret. The pregnancy, the Ashbourne revelation. The truth that she had always been far more than an assistant. And he had done nothing to secure her trust. Mark hesitated in the doorway. Sir, she's not mine to keep, Adrian said, voice heavy. Not really. And maybe she never was. Mark nodded, but Adrian barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere. The weight of loss, the sharp sting of understanding too late that love is not possession. The night before the confrontation, Mara walked alone to the overlook. City lights sprawled beneath her. She touched her stomach, feeling the tiny life inside her, the responsibility that eclipsed even fear, even desire. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. No pressure. I'll be here tomorrow if you want me. She deleted it slowly. Not because she didn't want him, but because the choice wasn't just about what was easy or safe. It was about what was real, about what she could survive and still be whole. Another message. Adrian. Understand. Whatever you choose, I'll let you go. She didn't reply. She couldn't. She only exhaled, letting the night wind carry away the tension she had carried for months. The confrontation came fast. Victor Kane had returned, desperate and reckless, thinking he could leverage Adrian's power against Mara. The fight wasn't cinematic in the way movies made it seem. It was sharp, tense, and almost mechanical. Mara moved instinctively, protecting the life inside her, dodging every threat with precision Adrian hadn't seen before. Adrian arrived in the nick of time, unarmed but ready, intercepting Victor and forcing him to retreat. In the scuffle, Adrian was injured. More than a scratch, but not fatal. Enough to shock Mara to the core. She rushed to his side. His gaze softened as he looked at her. You survived because you were brave, he whispered. And I'm proud. I failed you, but I see you now. Her hand trembled on his arm. You almost lost me. Everything. I know, he said quietly. And I can't undo it. Days later, Adrian was recovering in the hospital. Mara stood at the doorway, hesitant. You don't have to stay, he said softly. I know, she replied. A long silence hung. I wanted you to know, Adrian continued, voice low. I finally understand. I finally understand what I broke. Mara's chest ached. She wanted to forgive, to run, to stay, to leave. But she stayed quiet. You loved me, she said finally. But love that demands fear is not love. Adrian closed his eyes. The weight of that truth pressed down on both of them. For the first time he let her go. Fully. No manipulation, no expectation. Just acknowledgement. Julian was waiting in the corridor. Calm, patient, understanding but firm. You don't have to choose me, he said. Not today. Not ever. Mara felt tears welling. She wanted him, she wanted stability, she wanted to escape the storm entirely. But she knew the truth. She could not live in certainty with anyone yet. Julian nodded, as if reading her thoughts. Then I'll leave you the dignity of deciding on your own terms. She whispered, Thank you. He smiled once, quietly, and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, leaving her alone. If this part hurt, you're not alone. Subscribe, this channel tells stories that stay with you. Mara at the city overlook. The lights fading beneath the rising sun. Her hand rested on her stomach. Life. Responsibility. Freedom. Power. Love. She took a breath. I used to think love was something you survived. Then I thought it was something you escaped. Now I know it's something you choose, knowing exactly what it will cost you. She turned toward the light. Toward a future no one could script for her. The world continued spinning, indifferent, but she was ready. Mara didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, tracing the outline of the city skyline with her finger. Every light reminded her of Adrian, the life he had tried to impose on her, the power he wielded, the man she had once loved in fragments she could barely claim as her own. Her phone buzzed. Julian again. Meet me at the Overlook. Sunrise. No expectations. She hesitated. Then finally she texted back. See you there. The air at the Overlook was cold, tinged with the faint smell of morning rain. Julian was already there, hands in his pockets, looking like he belonged to the calm itself. You came, he said softly. I promised, she replied. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, unsteady, raw. They walked together in silence for a while. The city sprawled below, alive and oblivious. Mara's mind was a storm. Adrian, Julian, Victor Kane, the pregnancy, her identity. Every piece of her life felt like it was pressing inward, demanding resolution, demanding choice. Julian finally broke the silence. You've carried everything alone for too long. I want you to know. You don't have to anymore. I know, Mara whispered. But knowing didn't make the choice easier. The pull toward Adrian was still there, a storm she had survived yet could not outrun. He loves you, Julian said carefully. But not in the way you need right now. Mara flinched. The truth in that statement cut deeper than she expected. Adrian's love had always been intense, consuming, dangerous. Julian's was quiet, patient, grounding, but quiet could feel like absence when her soul still remembered fire. I don't know if I can survive letting him go, she admitted. You already survived him, Julian said. Now survive yourself. That's the only choice that matters. Meanwhile, Adrian was back in his penthouse, nursing his injuries from Victor Kane's attack. He hadn't expected to feel so vulnerable. Pain had a strange clarity. He remembered every misstep, every moment he had underestimated Mara, every word he had spoken that had hurt her. He replayed their encounters, the parking garage, the gala, the confrontation at his office. Each memory brought a sharp awareness. She had never belonged to him. She had only been present because she had allowed it. And he had tried to control what could never be contained. I lost her, he muttered to himself. And maybe I deserve that. Mark, entering cautiously, placed a hand on his shoulder. Sir. Adrian shook his head. No, Mark. Not today. I need to understand what freedom looks like. Without me. Without control. Without me. Mark nodded, silently acknowledging the rare moment of humility. The next confrontation with Victor Kane escalated the stakes one last time. Kane had returned, believing Adrian's absence left Mara vulnerable. He cornered her in a deserted alley, demanding leverage over her life and the life she carried. Mara's response was calculated, precise, unflinching. She had survived months of manipulation, threats, and deception. This time she would not falter. She baited Kane into overextending, then triggered the silent alarm she had installed. Red lights flashed, footsteps echoed, and Kane realized too late that he had misjudged her. Adrian arrived moments later, stepping from the shadows. He didn't fight. He didn't negotiate. He simply intercepted Kane, using presence and authority to defuse the situation. Kane fled, leaving both of them shaken but alive. You were reckless, Adrian said softly, studying her. I was smart, Mara shot back. I survived. For the first time, Adrian didn't argue. He only looked at her with an expression of profound understanding. Awe, regret, and something dangerously close to love. Days later, Mara arrived at the city overlook once more, just as the first rays of sun cut across the horizon. Julian was there, patient, calm, steady, the embodiment of what she could have if she chose safety over storm. You don't have to decide now, Julian said, his voice quiet, unpressured. I have to, Mara replied. Her voice was firm but trembled with emotion. Not because I want to, but because everything else depends on it. Not just me. Not just this life inside me. Julian remained silent, giving her space. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't try to guide her. He simply waited, a reminder that choice was hers alone. And then, from the city below, she imagined Adrian watching, not demanding, not controlling, simply watching. His love had been a storm, and storms left wreckage. But storms also revealed what lay beneath the surface. Raw emotion, truth, and irreversible consequence. Mara closed her eyes, hand on her stomach. The tiny life within her moved. She felt the weight of responsibility, the power to choose, and the clarity she had been seeking all along. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her. I survive this. For me. For the life I carry. For the future I choose. Adrian awoke from a brief unconscious state, recovering fully from his injuries. When Mara visited, he didn't plead. He didn't demand. He only said softly, I see you now. I see everything I couldn't before. I let you go. Truly. Mara's eyes filled. She wanted to forgive. She wanted to collapse into his arms. But she didn't. She only nodded. Thank you, she whispered. Adrian smiled faintly, a shadow of what he had once been. Be safe, he said. Outside the hospital, Julian waited, hands in pockets, giving her the space she needed. Mara didn't move toward him. She didn't move toward anyone. She simply exhaled, feeling the weight of choice settle into her bones. I am mine, she thought. And that is enough. As the sun fully rose, Mara walked to the edge of the overlook, the city alive below her. She could feel freedom, responsibility, love, and loss all at once. She could feel the past and the present merging into a future that belonged to her alone. She looked at her phone. Messages from Adrian and Julian remained unread. She didn't need them right now. Instead, she took a deep breath, placed her hand over her stomach, and stepped forward into the light. The world moved beneath her, relentless and indifferent. But Mara had survived, chosen, and reclaimed herself. And that was everything. Mara sat on the balcony of her apartment, early morning light spilling over the city skyline. The weight she had carried for months, the pregnancy, Adrian, Julian, her identity, pressed down on her. She touched her stomach, feeling the life growing inside her, and realized that nothing in the world mattered more than this tiny heartbeat. Nothing, not Adrian, not Julian, not the past she had uncovered, not even the fear of the unknown. Her phone buzzed. Julian. Coffee. Sunrise. No expectations. She hesitated, then texted back. I'll be there. The overlook was empty except for Julian. He stood with his hands in his pockets, calm, patient, exuding the quiet strength she had always relied on but had never fully admitted she craved. You came, he said softly, his voice carrying a steadiness that anchored her. I promised, Mara replied, though the words sounded fragile even to her. We need to talk about everything. He nodded. I know. They walked together in silence for a while, the city lights fading as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon. Mara's mind was a storm of memories, regrets, and desires. Adrian's sharp eyes haunted her. His voice, his intensity, his failures and his confessions, they all pulled at her like gravity. Julian finally broke the silence. You don't have to decide now, he said. I do, she whispered. Not because I want to, but because I have to. Not just for me, for the life I carry, and for who I am now. Julian reached out gently, brushing her hand with his fingertips. Then take your time. We'll wait. But remember, I won't wait forever. The words hit her with more weight than she expected. Not because he demanded it, but because she understood that choices always had limits, consequences always had edges. Meanwhile, Adrian sat in his penthouse, looking out over the same city. He had been through anger, guilt, frustration, and fear, but none of that prepared him for clarity. Mara was not his possession. She had never been. He had tried to control her, to anchor her, to keep her within the boundaries he understood, but she had always been bigger, smarter, braver than him. Mark entered cautiously. Sir, she. Adrian shook his head. Not today, Mark. She doesn't need me to guide her. She needs me to let go. And maybe I need to learn what that means myself. Mark nodded silently. Adrian's vulnerability was almost shocking. A man of power, control, and influence finally realizing that love could not be forced. Back at the overlook, Mara's internal conflict reached a crescendo. She closed her eyes, remembering the first time Adrian had truly looked at her. Not as a secretary, not as an object, but as someone formidable, intelligent, and terrifyingly alive. The way he had loved her. Fiercely, dangerously, incompletely. The storms of their past were intoxicating, and she ached for them in a way she could barely name. Then she thought of Julian. His patience, his calm, his unwavering presence. The quiet promise that life could be less painful, less chaotic, more honest. He represented a different kind of love, a sanctuary she could step into without fear. Her heart ached from the magnitude of the choice. Love versus safety. Desire versus reason. Storm versus calm. And yet, amid the pain, a quiet truth emerged. She was not a prize to be won, nor a possession to be controlled. She was herself. Always had been. Julian broke through her reverie. Whatever you choose, it will be right. Because it's yours. Mara opened her eyes, looking at him. I don't know if I can do this without feeling like I'm losing part of myself. You won't lose yourself, Julian said gently. You'll just be choosing the part that survives. The words resonated deep and undeniable. Survival had always defined her, but now survival and choice intertwined, creating a path she could walk alone if she had to. Meanwhile, Adrian, unaware of the moment at the Overlook, prepared himself for the inevitable. He called Mara, not to plead, not to manipulate, but to speak the truth he had withheld for too long. Mara, he said, voice quiet but firm, I need you to know something. I see now. Everything I tried to hold on to, everything I tried to control, it was never mine to have. You were never mine. And maybe you never will be. But I needed you to know that I finally understand that. Mara listened, heart pounding. The words were devastating, but they carried relief too. Adrian was letting go. Not with a dramatic gesture, not with coercion, not with anger, but simply by acknowledging the truth. Thank you, she whispered. Be safe, he replied. And in that moment, she realized that love could exist without possession, without fear, without control. The final confrontation was internal. Mara closed her phone, breathed deeply, and faced the sunrise alone. She placed her hand over her stomach, feeling the tiny heartbeat of the life that would define her choices. She thought of Adrian, the storm, the passion, the intensity, and Julian, the calm, the patience, the unwavering support. I am not theirs, she whispered to herself. I am mine. And this life is mine too. She took one last look at the city, at the path she had survived, at the choices she had made, and stepped forward into the light. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, did Mara make the right choice?